the very wounds that seemed designed to break you were in fact the fire that shaped you? What if the story of your scars was not the end of the book, but the beginning of a legacy? And what if the little girl who grew up with nothing, no money, no protection, no privilege, was destined to become the most powerful woman in media and one of the most influential voices in the modern world? This is not just the story of a celebrity. This is the blueprint of transformation, of turning wounds into wisdom and pain into power. Today, on Lessons from Legends, we decode the life of Oprah Winfrey. The soil of beginnings. It begins in 1954 in the red clay soil of Kosciuszko, Mississippi. The world into which Oprah Gayle Winfrey was born was not built for her success. The 1950s South was a land divided. Segregation still ran deep. Opportunity was scarce, and for a poor black child born to a teenage single mother, life seemed to begin with doors already closed. Her mother, Vernita, was only 18 years old, working as a housemaid, living on the margins. Her father, Vernon, was not present in her earliest years, so Oprah was sent to live with her grandmother, Hattie Mae, in a small farmhouse with no running water and no electricity. The floorboards creaked under bare feet. The smell of biscuits baking in a wood-fired oven mixed with the musty air of poverty. This was not a life of comfort. This was survival. And yet, inside that small wooden house, something extraordinary was beginning to grow. The gift of words. Hattie Mae, stern and devout, believed in discipline, faith, and the power of education. She taught Oprah to read before most children knew their alphabet. By the age of 3, Oprah was standing in church pews, reciting Bible verses with a thunder in her voice that shocked adults into silence. Her voice was small in size, but mighty in spirit. Imagine the scene: a congregation dressed in their Sunday best, fans waving in the hot Mississippi air, a little girl in a hand-sewn dress, her eyes bright, her diction precise, delivering scripture as though the words were written in her bones. People didn't just hear her, they felt her. It was as if she had been born to speak, born to connect, born to hold an audience in the palm of her hand. That gift, her voice, would become her salvation. But at the time, it was simply a spark, a flicker of destiny against the backdrop of hardship. Poverty as a teacher. Poverty has a way of shaping the soul. It teaches hunger. It teaches resilience. It teaches the sharpness of longing, to want something more, even if you don't yet know what it is. For Oprah, poverty was not just an obstacle, it was a silent teacher. When you grow up wearing potato sacks because there are no new dresses, you learn shame, but you also learn creativity.
When you are given scraps and told to make them work, you learn resourcefulness. When you are told you don't belong in the rooms of power, you learn to create your own rooms. Oprah's early life was an unrelenting test of dignity, but hidden inside each humiliation was a blueprint, a lesson she would one day turn into strength.
Shadows of struggle. Yet, we must be honest. Childhood was not only about poverty. It was also about wounds, wounds too heavy for a child to carry. When she later went to live with her mother in Milwaukee, the struggles multiplied. Vernita was overwhelmed, working long hours, and young Oprah faced neglect and abuse that scarred her deeply. By the age of 14, Oprah had experienced more trauma than many adults face in a lifetime. These are details often softened in retelling, but the truth is this: Oprah knew despair intimately. She knew what it was to feel unseen, unheard, unprotected. And yet, she also knew what it was to survive. Her teenage years were not a polished coming-of-age story. They were messy, painful. At one point, she even ran away from home. Her life could easily have veered into tragedy, another statistic in a society that overlooked poor black girls. But here is where the blueprint of Oprah's life takes its first sharp turn. Instead of letting her circumstances define her, she began to lean into the one power she could claim: her ability to speak. The emerging voice. In school, Oprah stood out. Not because of wealth, she had none. Not because of privilege, there was none. But because when she spoke, people listened. Teachers saw her potential. She was given opportunities to read aloud, to participate in debate, to channel her inner world into spoken words. By the time she was a teenager, she had begun to sense the contours of a destiny larger than herself. Imagine being a girl who felt invisible at home, but discovered that in the classroom she was suddenly seen. That in a world that tried to silence her, her voice became undeniable. It was not fame yet. It was not fortune. But it was hope. And for a child who had carried so much despair, hope was revolutionary. Reflection, the first blueprint. Looking back, Oprah herself has said, "Turn your wounds into wisdom." Those are not just words on a page. They are lived experience. Her early life could have destroyed her. The poverty, the abuse, the rejection, any one of those could have written her ending. But instead, they became her training ground. They became her crucible. They became the soil in which the seed of resilience grew. This is the first blueprint of Oprah Winfrey. Your past is not a prison. It is a foundation. The scars do not erase your future. They write the map that leads to it. Transition. And so, when we think of Oprah today, the empire, the influence, the billions of dollars, the ability to sit with presidents and pop stars alike, we must remember this: it all began with a little girl in Mississippi
standing barefoot on a wooden church floor, reading words with the power of fire, long before the world ever knew her name.
Every great story has a moment when the darkness begins to lift, when the weight of early struggle gives way to the first glimpse of light. For Oprah Winfrey, that light began to flicker in her teenage years. Even though she carried the scars of poverty and trauma, her voice, the very gift that had carried her through the storms of childhood, was about to open doors no one expected. Discovering a path forward. By the time she reached high school, Oprah was no longer just a girl with a voice. She had become a young woman with presence. Teachers noticed it. Classmates noticed it. Whenever she read aloud, whenever she gave a speech, there was a stillness in the room, as if everyone knew they were witnessing something rare. At just 17 years old, Oprah entered a local beauty pageant. It was not glamour that won her the crown. It was her voice. The judges, captivated by her confidence, offered her more than a sash and a smile. They offered her a scholarship to Tennessee State University. For a girl who grew up wearing potato sacks as dresses, this was more than an award. It was a key to education, opportunity, and a different future. That scholarship marked her first real breakthrough. It was as if the universe was whispering, "You were never meant to stay where you started." The first microphone. Soon after, another door opened. Oprah was hired by a local radio station in Nashville. She was just a teenager, but the moment her voice hit the airwaves, something clicked. Her delivery wasn't polished in the traditional sense. She didn't sound like the stiff, scripted broadcasters of the time. She sounded real, authentic, and people leaned in. She began doing the news on air, and for the first time in her life, her voice was no longer confined to a classroom or a church. It was reaching thousands.
But with the opportunity came challenges. In a world dominated by white male broadcasters, a young black woman with a natural emotional style was not easily accepted. She stumbled. She mispronounced words. She felt the sting of being told she wasn't good enough for television. And eventually, she was demoted from her position as a news anchor. The reason? She was too emotional. She allowed her feelings to show when she read stories. In an era where the news demanded cold detachment, Oprah's empathy was considered a flaw. But here's the lesson. What others called a weakness was actually her greatest strength. The very empathy that cost her a news desk job would one day build her an empire. Failure as fuel. Most people, when told they don't belong, shrink back. But Oprah chose a different path. She leaned into the criticism, and instead of hiding her emotions, she decided to own them. She began to realize that being too emotional was not a liability, it was her superpower. At 19, she transitioned from straight news into talk television. She joined a small morning show in Nashville, where the format allowed her to interact with guests. Here, for the first time, she didn't have to pretend to be detached. She could be herself. She could laugh, she could cry, she could ask the hard questions, and people loved it. Audiences responded. Viewers who had never seen themselves represented on television saw in Oprah not just a host, but a mirror, a voice that understood them, a woman who felt their struggles as if they were her own. This shift from news to talk was not just a career move, it was a calling. It was the first sign that Oprah was walking into the lane she was born to fill.
Chicago, the defining opportunity. By the early 1980s, Oprah's style had attracted attention beyond Nashville. Television executives in Chicago were searching for a new host to revive a struggling morning show called AM Chicago. It was a bold gamble. Oprah was not a national star. She was not polished like other TV personalities. But when she walked onto that set in January of 1984, everything changed. Her very first broadcast shattered expectations. Ratings skyrocketed. Within months, AM Chicago went from dead last in local rankings to the #1 talk show in the city. What made it work? It wasn't flashy sets. It wasn't celebrity guests. It was Oprah's authenticity. She wasn't just asking questions, she was listening. She wasn't just interviewing, she was connecting. When guests cried, she cried with them. When they laughed, she laughed too. Audiences who had felt invisible suddenly felt seen. Viewers who had never imagined that television could reflect their struggles found in Oprah a friend, a sister, a confidant. By 1986, AM Chicago was rebranded as The Oprah Winfrey Show. And what began as a local experiment was about to become a global phenomenon. Blueprint lesson: embrace what sets you apart. Looking back, the arc of Act Two is clear. Oprah's so-called weaknesses became her weapons. Her empathy, once criticized, became her signature. Her authenticity, once dismissed, became her brand. Her failures, once painful, became the fuel for reinvention. This is the blueprint. What disqualifies you in one room may be the very thing that crowns you in another. Closing transition. By the mid-1980s, Oprah Winfrey was no longer just a name, she was a force. The girl who once wore potato sacks as dresses was now commanding Chicago television screens. The young woman told she was too emotional for news was now redefining what television could be. And as the world began to take notice, a new chapter was unfolding, one that would not just change her life, but would change television itself. By the late 1990s, Oprah Winfrey was no longer simply a talk show host. She had become a phenomenon. Her show was syndicated in over 100 countries. Tens of millions of viewers tuned in every week. But behind the cameras, something even more significant was happening. Oprah was quietly building an empire. In 1986, she founded Harpo Productions, a bold move that gave her creative control over her own show. At a time when few women and even fewer African Americans owned major media companies, Oprah carved out her own seat at the table.
Harpo, which was Oprah spelled backwards, became more than just a company name. It became a symbol of taking ownership of her destiny. With Harpo, she was no longer just talent hired to appear on screen. She was the executive, the producer, the decision-maker. She controlled the content, the profits, and most importantly, the vision. The impact of this decision was enormous. Most talk show hosts of the time had little power over their programs. Networks dictated the terms. But Oprah's vision for her show and her life was too big to fit inside anyone else's box. By owning Harpo Productions, she rewrote the power dynamics of television.
Harpo quickly expanded beyond the daily talk show. Oprah moved into film production, co-producing movies such as The Color Purple, a film that mirrored some of her own struggles and triumphs. Her performance in the film, powerful and raw, earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress. It was her first major step into Hollywood, proof that her influence could extend far beyond the daytime screen. In the years that followed, Harpo produced more films, miniseries, and specials. Oprah's name became synonymous with quality storytelling that blended entertainment with moral purpose. She wasn't interested in empty spectacle. She wanted meaning. Every project carried a deeper message, whether it was about justice, resilience, or human dignity. This period also marked the beginning of Oprah's publishing influence. She launched the Oprah magazine in 2000, which quickly grew to millions of monthly readers. The magazine reflected her philosophy, a blend of self-improvement, inspiration, and empowerment. Readers felt as though each issue was a personal letter from Oprah herself, urging them to live more fully and authentically. But perhaps her most influential publishing venture was still her book club. Launched as a segment of her show, it soon became a cultural institution. Books chosen by Oprah often sold millions of copies, lifting authors from obscurity to fame overnight. It wasn't just a book club, it was a movement, a reminder of the power of stories to connect, heal, and transform.
Financially, Oprah was breaking records. By the year 2000, she had become the first African-American woman billionaire. Her wealth was staggering, but her real achievement was how she used it. Unlike many celebrities who simply enjoyed their riches, Oprah reinvested her fortune into her mission. She funded scholarships. She built schools. She supported causes that aligned with her values, from education to healthcare to women's empowerment. Her philanthropy was not an afterthought. It was a cornerstone of her empire. Yet through all of this, Oprah remained rooted in authenticity. Even as she became a billionaire media mogul, her audience never felt she was distant. They still saw her as a trusted friend, someone who understood their struggles because she had lived them herself. The lesson of this period in her life was clear. True power comes from ownership. By owning her company, her content, and her voice, Oprah ensured that no one else could dictate her story. She had taken the pen back, and with it, she was writing not only her own narrative, but a blueprint for generations to come. Act 4, Part 1 reveals a critical truth. Oprah's legacy was not built by chance. It was built by design. It was built by courage. and it was built by the decision to move from being talent to becoming a creator, an owner, and a visionary.
By the mid-1990s, Oprah Winfrey's name was no longer confined to television. Her influence had expanded into culture, politics, business, and philanthropy. She was no longer just America's talk show queen. She was becoming a global icon. One of her most remarkable qualities was her ability to build trust. Surveys throughout the decade consistently ranked Oprah as one of the most trusted public figures in the United States. For millions of viewers, she was not simply a celebrity, she was a confidant, someone who understood their private struggles, someone who spoke directly to their hearts. That trust translated into influence. When Oprah recommended a book, it became a bestseller. When she endorsed a product, sales exploded. When she highlighted an issue, it entered the national conversation. This phenomenon came to be known as the Oprah effect, the ability of one woman to shape markets, culture, and public opinion with a single sentence. Yet Oprah did not treat her influence lightly. She understood that her platform was a gift, and she carried it with responsibility. Rather than use her voice solely for entertainment, she began to focus more intentionally on empowerment and social change. Of course, her growing influence extended into politics as well. When she endorsed Barack Obama in 2008, analysts estimated that her support delivered millions of votes, potentially shifting the outcome of the Democratic primaries. Few media personalities in history had wielded such political weight. Through it all, Oprah remained consistent in her philosophy. To whom much is given, much is required. She understood that wealth and fame meant little if they were not used to serve others. The lesson of Act 4, Part 2 is simple yet profound. Influence is not the goal, it is the responsibility. Oprah Winfrey's global reach was not just about expanding her brand, it was about expanding opportunity, dignity, and hope. By the end of the 2000s, Oprah was more than a media mogul. She was a philanthropist, an educator, a cultural leader. She had turned her platform into a global stage for change. And yet, even as she built schools, funded scholarships, and influenced politics, one truth remained constant. Oprah never forgot the little girl in Mississippi who grew up wearing potato sacks as dresses. Every act of giving, every moment of service was a tribute to the struggles that shaped her. This is the enduring blueprint of Oprah Winfrey. Success means little unless it is shared. Wealth means little unless it uplifts. Fame means little unless it inspires.
This was most evident in her philanthropy. Oprah became one of the most generous philanthropists of her generation. She established the Oprah Winfrey Foundation and the Oprah Winfrey Operating Foundation, funding initiatives in education, healthcare, and women's rights. She poured millions into scholarships for underprivileged students. Thousands of young people received an education because of her generosity. For Oprah, it was never simply about writing checks. It was about creating opportunities that had once been denied to her. Perhaps her most ambitious philanthropic effort was the creation of the Oprah Winfrey Leadership Academy for Girls in South Africa. Opened in 2007,
The school was a $40 million project designed to provide world-class education to girls from disadvantaged backgrounds. Oprah personally interviewed many of the students, ensuring that the academy was filled with young women who had both the talent and the determination to change their world. Her message was clear. Education is the way to move mountains, to build bridges, to change the world. For Oprah, investing in education was investing in the future. Beyond education, Oprah used her show and her wealth to respond to crises. She raised funds for disaster relief after Hurricane Katrina, and she supported campaigns to fight poverty and disease across the globe. She was not content to be a passive donor. She was hands-on, often visiting communities directly to see the impact of her efforts. While philanthropy became a central pillar of her legacy, Oprah also used her influence to elevate social and cultural conversations. She hosted dialogues about race, gender, spirituality, and justice. She encouraged viewers to seek personal growth, to embrace forgiveness, and to find purpose in their lives. In a world saturated with negativity and conflict, Oprah's voice was a counterbalance, a reminder that media could uplift instead of exploit. She proved that television could be a force not just for profit, but for healing.
When we search for the blueprint of Oprah Winfrey's life, we do not begin with wealth, fame, or influence. We begin with pain, poverty, abuse, rejection. These were not interruptions in her journey. They were the soil where her resilience grew. The first principle of her personal transformation is this: turn your wounds into wisdom. Oprah's childhood was filled with wounds, being left in the care of others, wearing dresses made from potato sacks, enduring experiences no child should ever face. And yet, she refused to let those experiences define her as broken. She chose to redefine them as lessons. Later in life, when guests came on her show to share their own traumas, survivors of violence, people battling addiction, individuals carrying invisible scars, Oprah's empathy came not from theory, but from memory. She could sit with their pain because she had sat with her own. This is the wisdom of wounds. They can either close us off or open us up. Oprah's blueprint teaches us to let them open us, to let the pain carve deeper compassion, to let scars become maps that guide others forward.
The second principle of her transformation is this. In an industry built on masks, Oprah dared to be herself. She admitted her insecurities, her struggles with weight, her mistakes and doubts. Instead of weakening her image, it strengthened it, because audiences do not crave perfection, they crave truth. One of the most famous examples came in 1988 when Oprah wheeled a red wagon onto her stage filled with 57 pounds of fat, the exact amount of weight she had lost. The image shocked viewers, but what made it unforgettable was her honesty about the struggle. She admitted that weight was not just a physical battle, but an emotional one. By exposing her own vulnerability, she gave permission for millions to face theirs. Authenticity, then, is not just about honesty. It is about courage. The courage to be seen as you really are. Oprah's blueprint reminds us that when we stop performing, we start connecting. The third principle is one Oprah embodied throughout her career. From the earliest days of her talk show, Oprah broke the unspoken rule of television professionalism. Don't get too close. Don't get too personal. She did the opposite. When guests cried, she cried with them. When they shared shame, she often shared her own. In doing so, she created a new kind of stage, one where people felt safe enough to reveal truths they had never spoken aloud. It was not weakness. It was leadership of the highest form.
Vulnerability, Oprah teaches us, is not the absence of strength. It is the presence of trust. It tells the world, I am human, just like you. And in that admission, we discover the deepest bond of all, shared humanity. These three principles form the heart of Oprah's personal blueprint. Turn wounds into wisdom. Authenticity is power. And vulnerability builds trust. But principles mean little without practice. So how do we apply them in our own lives? To turn wounds into wisdom, we must first stop running from them. Reflection turns pain into perspective. Perspective turns scars into strength. Like Oprah, we can ask, what is this pain here to teach me? To live authentically, we must let go of the exhausting pursuit of perfection. Masks may win applause, but they cannot build trust. When we dare to show up as we are, we invite others to do the same. And to practice vulnerability, we must risk being seen. Yes, it feels dangerous, but it is the only way to build real connection. Vulnerability is not about oversharing. It is about openness, the courage to say, this is me. Oprah's Act 5, Part 1 teaches us that transformation is not a lightning strike. It is a daily choice. A choice to see wounds as wisdom, to live with authenticity, and to lead with vulnerability. The blueprint is clear. Greatness is not built on avoiding pain. It is built on transforming it. It is not built on hiding. It is built on showing up real. And it is not built on walls of strength. It is built on bridges of trust.
If Act 5, Part 1 revealed Oprah's personal transformation, then Part 2 shows us her path to professional mastery. It is here that we discover how she turned talent into empire, how she transformed rejection into redirection, and how she redefined what leadership in media could look like. The first principle of Oprah's professional blueprint is this: failures are redirections. In her early career, Oprah was told she was too emotional for news. She was demoted, criticized, nearly written off. For many, such rejection would have ended the story. But for Oprah, it became the turning point. Instead of shrinking, she pivoted. She moved from the rigid world of straight news into the more flexible space of talk television. And there she found her true calling. Her so-called weakness, empathy, became her strength. What critics dismissed as too emotional became the very quality that allowed her to connect with millions. This is a lesson for all professionals. Failure is not a dead end. It is a detour, a redirection toward the path we were meant to walk. Oprah's journey reminds us that rejection often carries hidden guidance. It is life saying, "Not here, this way." The second principle is one that defined her career. In 1986, when she created Harpo Productions, Oprah did more than start a company. She claimed ownership of her destiny. She refused to let networks dictate her message. By owning her production house, she owned her content, her profits, and her power. This was revolutionary. Few women, and even fewer Black women, had such control in the entertainment industry. Oprah showed that true mastery comes not just from being excellent at your craft, but from owning the means of creation. For professionals everywhere, the lesson is clear. If you do not own your voice, someone else will shape your story. Mastery requires not only skill, but sovereignty. The third principle is one Oprah embodied every day on her stage. Empathy creates connection. Her interviews were not performances, they were conversations. She listened deeply. She allowed silence to breathe. She made her guests feel safe enough to reveal truths they had never spoken aloud.
Think of the countless ordinary people who sat on her stage and shared extraordinary pain. Survivors of abuse, victims of injustice, families in crisis. They opened up because Oprah's empathy created trust, and that trust created transformation. Even with celebrities, her empathy broke barriers. Michael Jackson, Tom Cruise, Barack Obama, they were not just icons on her stage. They were human beings, willing to reveal themselves in ways no other interviewer could have drawn out. This is the professional power of empathy. It is not a soft skill, it is a core skill. In leadership, in management, in media, empathy is the key that unlocks hearts, that builds loyalty, that transforms audiences into communities. Together, these principles, failures are redirections. Own your voice, own your platform. Empathy creates connection. Form the foundation of Oprah's professional mastery. Her career was not the straight climb up a ladder. It was a winding path of setbacks and breakthroughs. But by embracing redirection, by claiming ownership, and by practicing radical empathy, she built not only a show, but an empire. The lesson of Act 5, Part 2 is this. Professional mastery is not about avoiding mistakes. It is about transforming them into momentum. It is about refusing to surrender your voice. And it is about leading with empathy, the greatest tool of connection we have. We have walked through Oprah Winfrey's personal transformation and her professional mastery. Now, in Act 5, Part 3, we turn to the final layer of her blueprint, legacy and impact. The first principle here is simple, yet profound. Success means little unless it uplifts others. Oprah became a billionaire, but she never defined herself by wealth. Instead, she defined herself by what her wealth could do. From scholarships in America to schools in South Africa,
Her fortune became fuel for opportunity. Consider the Oprah Winfrey Leadership Academy for Girls. Built with $40 million of her own money, it was more than a school. It was a sanctuary, a launching pad for young women who might otherwise have been forgotten. Each girl represented a ripple of change that would extend far beyond the Academy's walls. Oprah's blueprint teaches us that success is hollow if it does not lift others along the way. True greatness multiplies itself. The second principle of her legacy is this: education is the greatest equalizer. Oprah often spoke of the teachers who changed her life, the ones who encouraged her voice, who made her believe she was more than her circumstances. That belief fueled her passion for education as philanthropy.
Through her foundations, she funded thousands of scholarships. She invested in literacy programs, built libraries, and supported schools across the globe. To Oprah, education was not charity, it was justice. It was giving children the tools to write their own destinies. For those seeking their own blueprint, this lesson is clear. If you want to change the future, invest in minds. Knowledge does not just inform, it transforms. The third principle of her impact is this: influence is responsibility, not privilege. Oprah understood that her platform could shape culture. A single recommendation from her book club could sell millions of copies. A single endorsement could sway an election. But she never treated this lightly. She curated her stage carefully. She elevated voices that deserved to be heard. She used her influence not to exploit pain, but to dignify it. Even in politics, when she endorsed Barack Obama in 2008, she did so not as a celebrity chasing relevance, but as a citizen who believed in change. Her blueprint teaches us that influence is not about spotlight. It is about stewardship. It is about holding power with humility and using it to serve a greater good.
Taken together, these principles form Oprah's legacy blueprint. Success means little unless it uplifts others. Education is the greatest equalizer. Influence is responsibility, not privilege. But beyond the lists and lessons, her greatest impact lies in the millions of lives quietly transformed. A student who finished college because of her scholarship. A viewer who found courage to leave an abusive relationship. An author who became a household name through her book club. A girl in South Africa who discovered she was destined not for survival, but for leadership. These stories are the true measure of legacy. Not headlines, not bank accounts, but lives touched, hearts healed, futures changed. And so, Act 5, Part 3, leaves us with this final truth. Legacy is not about what you achieve for yourself. It is about what you set in motion for others. Oprah Winfrey's blueprint is not reserved for billionaires or media icons. It is available to anyone willing to live with courage, to share their story with honesty, and to use their influence, no matter how small, to make the world kinder and more just.
And so we arrive at the final chapter of this journey. The story, not just of a woman, but of a blueprint. We began in Mississippi with a little girl in a dress sewn from potato sacks.
A child no one expected to rise. A voice no one expected to carry beyond a church pew. That child became a young woman rejected by newsrooms, demoted, doubted, dismissed. And yet, she refused to disappear. She built her career not on polish, but on presence. Not on perfection, but on authenticity. She turned wounds into wisdom. She transformed rejection into redirection. She showed the world that vulnerability is not weakness, but strength in its purest form. From the stage of the Oprah Winfrey Show, she touched tens of millions of lives. From the heart of Harpo Productions, she built one of the most successful media empires in history. From her philanthropy, she opened doors of education for children who might never have dreamed of it.
Oprah's legacy is not measured in ratings, or in wealth, or even in awards. It is measured in lives changed. In the woman who left an abusive marriage after hearing a survivor's story on the show. In the child who became the first in her family to graduate college because of Oprah's scholarship. In the millions who read again because of her book club. The blueprint she leaves us is this: pain can become power. Authenticity is influence. Vulnerability builds trust. Ownership creates freedom. Empathy creates connection. And success means little unless it uplifts others. As we close this story, imagine Oprah's journey not as a straight line, but as a series of doors. Some slammed shut in her face. Others creaked open unexpectedly. And some she built herself. That is her true legacy, the courage to walk through, and when no door exists, to build one. For each of us listening, the invitation is clear. What wounds in your life are waiting to be turned into wisdom? What truths are you hiding that, if spoken, could free not only you, but others? And what influence, small or large, can you hold as responsibility, not privilege?
The story of Oprah Winfrey is not a fairy tale. It is a blueprint, a roadmap etched in scars and triumphs, in tears and in laughter, in rejection and in reinvention. It reminds us that no beginning is too humble, no failure too final, no dream too impossible. And so as we end this episode of Lessons from Legends, remember her words. You are responsible for your life. And when you get that, everything changes. If there is a legend whose success you want us to decode next, let us know in the comments. We read every single one. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode if it inspired you. Thank you for joining us. This has been Lessons from Legends. We'll see you in the next episode.